All right, today on Ranger Auto we have a 2009 Lincoln MKS. It started out with a PO 130, which is bad O2 sensor, bank 1. It's going to be the top sensor. I've changed both the top sensors on banks 1 and 2 yesterday. So we went through yesterday. I didn't tape none of this. I went through and did spark plugs on it, changed the O2 sensors on it, because it's also got a P0301 and a P0303 code for misfire. Whenever you get a 0300 code for misfire, it's usually fuel related. If you get an 0350 code, that is coil pack related. Okay, so if you see somebody going in here and they're changing coil packs for an 0300 code, you're never going to get it, because 0300 is fuel related. That's either fuel pump, fuel filter, oxygen sensors, bad throttle body, anything that affects fuel is going to be an 0300 code. In this case, we've got 2 bad injectors on back bank, which is bank 1. We got to change injectors 1 and 3, because that's the code we're getting. Plus, when it's running, it smells really strong of fuel. So we're going to start off by, we got to get our intake unit off, and we got to get our upper plenum off. We're not going to worry about discharging the fuel rail, because if we've got a leaking injector, which we do, there's no pressure on the rail. But normally what you would do is you would find your relay in the fuse box, pull the relay, crank it till it dies. If you've got a Schrader valve on your fuel lines or fuel rail, this one doesn't. But if you had one, you would go ahead and just push that down and let the fuel off. These, they're usually pretty low fuel systems. So let's get started. We got to disconnect our map sensor. So we'll take that loose right there. Pull our clips on the bottom, pull this tube up. Get it out of the way. Let's see, we've got this tube here we need to remove, so you push that back and it should come right off, because it came off yesterday without a problem. Oh, it wants to fight me again, so we'll go ahead and take it off down there on the front covers there. We need to unplug our throttle body and remove that line. All right, we need to disconnect our purge line back here. That's the push and pull. And then we need to take our clamp loose on our throttle body so we can get our throttle body air tube off. So we'll get that taken off. That just comes up, pick up, pull off, and set that to the side. Yeah, I could smell the gas the minute I pulled that up off of there, so it's pretty bad. Alright, so we need to move our coolant hoses. If you want, you can unplug this one from the top line here. Sometimes what I'll do is I'll unhook this hose from the reservoir. I'll show you. Your hose goes on over here on your reservoir, and you can take it off that way if you want to. Sometimes you can just leave it on there. Alright, you've got a bolt underneath the throttle body. Mine's a 10 millimeter because I had to replace it, but all the bolts on the intake are 8. I had to replace it because another shop somewhere did not put it back in. It's a major brace for your intake, so it's important that it's in there. Ford doesn't put stuff places it don't belong for any purpose. So we gotta pull that bolt back out. It's a little hard to get to. Try not to lose it or the washer. Let's see if I can get that to come out now. Might have to wait till I get the intake loosened up so I can spin it out by hand, which we can do right now. So let's go ahead and get our 6 bolts loose that hold our intake upper plenum on. And if you notice I'm not using my uniform today, it's because the heat index right now is 103. And I don't want to die. But we are working on the clock today, so we're going to start doing late nights again, which means I won't be filming anything because there's no light to film with. Take that screw out because that holds your fuel rail down to your intake. So how can you tell which fuel injectors are bad? Well, there's several different ways. You can do it using a scanning tool if you have bidirectional control. You can go into fuel injector test. I think that's what it's called, fuel injector test. And you can shut each injector off individually until you find the one that isn't functioning, and then you can go ahead and change it out. If you know what to look for in your live data, you can tell based off of what the fuel trims are on bank 1 or bank 2. That'll kind of narrow it down a little bit, because you'll have excessive fuel trim on the offending bank. If you can get to your injector plugs, you can unplug each injector one at a time till you find the one that's not functioning. In this case, I was able to get to number 1 and unplug it, and found out that the engine didn't change, so it wasn't even getting any fuel from that one there. However, when you unplug number 6, it just starts to lug down. So that tells me that that injector is really good. I think that's the only, well, yeah, that's the only options you have as far as finding your offending cylinder. If you have none of those things, just go off of your codes. If you've got codes that keep coming up, like I do on this one, start with those. Like this one's got an 0301 and an 0303. Well, it also had an 0130 for bank 1. 01, 1, 2, and 3 is on the back bank. That is bank 1. When I pulled that oxygen sensor out, it was covered in gas. It was completely wet. When I did 4, 5, and 6, which is bank 2, because I always change those out in pairs on a Ford, the front bank was dry. So that tells me that our offending cylinder is on the back. If you get an 0300 code, which is random misfire, I usually ignore those because those can be set for any reason. So whenever I get an 0300 code, I want to narrow it down to the actual cylinders causing the issue. I don't rely on 0300 for anything. That's like if you get an 0350 code, which is for coil pack, random coil pack misfire. Well, what are you going to do with that? You can't do nothing with it, because 0350 means that at one point or another, one of these misfired. Why? Who knows? It could be weather related. It could be a change in the fuel you use. It could be pressure change in the fuel pump. You know, it could be an anomaly somewhere. So whenever you get like a generalized 350 or a 300 code, I'll usually wait to diagnose that until I have more of an idea of what it is I'm looking for. That way you're not wasting your time chasing something that isn't there. Okay, so if you don't have a gel board, but you do have a nice flat space on your table, take your bolts out to hold your intake on. This back one here is going to be the long bolt. So you'll have one long bolt and 5 short bolts. Take your bolts and line them up on your bench the way they came out. That way they go back in the same way they came out. So that's what I'm doing here. This way, when I go back to my toolbox, I'll just grab the bolts as they came out. They'll go back in the hole they came from. So, all right, now we got to unhook our brake hose back there, and there's a hose for your back PCV that's right back here that you got to unplug. You got to unplug that hose there, and we'll get that here with our pliers. I like to use my angled channel locks for these clamps back here, but I can't find them. So you want to pick this up. You want to push your fuel rail back. You want to pick this up. Oh, we still got to get that bolt out down there. So let's see if we can get that bolt out. See, after you loosen up the tension on the plenum, you can get that bolt out underneath the throttle body. I'm not too concerned about that bolt since it's the only odd shaped bolt we have. So we can go ahead and we can pick up our intake. Yeah, see, we already got some evidence up here on, let's see, that's what, that runner goes down. Yep, that's bank 1. Okay, so I'm going to show you here in just a minute how to tell which banks on your engine. So if you, let me show you some diagnostic tricks that I've learned over the years. Kind of give you a hand in locating your problem. This hose should come right off because I had it off yesterday. All right. By the way, if you've had your intake off and you've already replaced your plenum like that, you don't have to do it again as long as they're pliable. This car had like maybe 5 minutes of run time, so I'm not going to have to replace those again. All right, on one of these engines, let me show you something. This is kind of like a dead giveaway as far as which injectors are going bad on you. All right, you see this is your lower plenum right here, okay? This is cylinder 1, cylinder 4, cylinder 2, cylinder 5, cylinder 3, and cylinder 6. All right, you want to look for the ones that have fuel around the outside of them. Like cylinder 1's got a lot of fuel, so that one is just dumping it, okay? I don't know if you can see down inside the engine or not, but we got definitely cylinders 1 and 2. Cylinder 3 is dry. So what we're going to do is we're going to pull the rail. You want to come up here and you want to unplug your injectors. They may or may not have a security tab on them, but let me get these unplugged, and then I'll get you a better view and we can start taking this plenum off, this fuel rail off. All right, so we want to disconnect our injector fuel leads by pulling back on this tab, and we're going to just pull up on this line right here. You got to unhook this line right here. This is your fuel line that goes to your rail. Alternatively, if you don't want to mess with that, you've got one of those down here that takes a special tool. You can unhook it there too if you want to. All right, so let's see, if that clip goes like that, then you got to push that clip back like that, take the clip out. Okay, now you should be able to lift up. Let's see, we got to push down, push this tab in till you hear it click, pull straight up. Okay, see, there's no fuel pressure because the injectors are dumping gas, so you don't have to worry about depressurizing it. Plus, even if you did have a good injector and you were just doing this as part of preventative maintenance, if you let the car sit overnight and you don't touch it, you won't have any pressure either. Just a little tidbit of information for you. All right, so to get our rail out, we got 4 bolts we got to take out. Then we got to pry the rail out of the plenum. And then, because we got our fuel line unhooked, we can take our rail over to the table and we can change out our offending injectors. Now, What you want to do if you get confused easily like I do is before you pull these out, you want to, well, I don't think you need to do all that, but what I was going to say was you could take a Sharpie and mark the injectors you're changing, but in this case I don't think we need to. So let's go ahead and get this rail out. 8mm, just like everything else. Just take these screws out right here. You're going to need a big screwdriver or a pry bar to pop this out. You also want to make sure you got something to lube the O-rings up before you put it back in. Otherwise you're going to get torn O-rings and then you're going to have a fuel leak. Now your new injectors come all ready to install, so you'll have new O-rings on them. You just got to have something like petroleum jelly or something like that to put on the O-rings so they slide down inside the engine. You don't ever want to put these in dry. You'll rip those O-rings. Alright, so we should be able just to pick this up. Let me go get my screwdriver and I will be right back. Alright, you want to grab your screwdriver right here. You're going to put it down right in here. Now let's see. You got to find a good spot and you're going to pry straight up until you can, injectors will pop out. Oh, that one's just a gushing fuel. Alright, so sometimes you can get these to come up. Try not to pop your clips off. But if they do pop off, that's fine. That fuel injector is just loaded full of fuel, which would be why we're having our fuel issue. You want to just kind of easy does it when you pull these out. Try not to pop your clips off. There we go. It helps if you pull on the side you want to get loose. Don't worry about your wiring, it's resilient. It will survive. So this side here we got to pry back like this. We got to get both sides out. This is the part that I hate about this job. I don't mind changing fuel injectors. I just mind changing fuel injectors that are a little bit of an ass pain to get out. That one, the O-ring fell inside the engine block, so we're going to have to go after that one. That one broke free too. Oh joy. Alright, so now that we got our rail loose, we're going to have to go after our O-rings that popped off. You see all the fuel that's dumping everywhere? You're going to get that. And then you want to pick your rail up. Looks like you got a clip here you got to open up. So we'll open that clip up and we'll get that wire out of it. We got to get this clip loose. You take a screwdriver and you just reach up in there and you trip that back like that and open that up, get that hook wire off of there. And let's see, that should be it, because this will come up and out pretty easily. And it will if you get that coolant line off. So this is how I do that. You unhook it right here on the engine. This way you don't have a big massive coolant mess, because you're going to get one if you do it the other way. Take your reservoir hose off of the reservoir if you can. And pull this off. Get your tube. Now you're going to have a little bit of a coolant leak, but it's a whole lot easier to handle this way than it is if you took it off the engine. And then you take your hose, slide it underneath the tube here. since it's rubber, it will work just fine that way. And you just kind of just send your hose underneath the fuel line and just kind of press it off to the side there. You're going to have a mess here, so if you want, you can put some rags down to catch the fuel. You just want to just kind of slide your line out of underneath all the electrical garbage you got to deal with here. And we got a fuel injector stuck in the engine. We're going to pull that out. Take your fuel system and flip it upside down on a table. This is definitely nowhere near textbook perfect. All right, so we got this injector we got to get out of here. So let's grab a hold of it and just kind of wiggle it back and forth till it comes out. First thing we're going to do is we're going to take a pick, and those injectors that left their O-rings behind, we're going to get those out first. And then we'll put those back on their injectors here in a minute. And you just reach down in there like this and you just pick up on the O-ring. Just reach down in here and you just pick up on the O-ring just like this. You want to use an angled pick, it works better. Alright, the rest of them came out okay. We got injector 1, which we're replacing. We got to get that one out. That one's done, you can tell. See that? That's all done. Alright, so that one's going to be tossed. We're going to set that one off to the side. We got to get injector number 4 out, which is this one here. It's got the retaining clip still stuck to it, so you want to get the retaining clip off first, set it up there. We're going to reuse the retaining clips, but we're going to put those on after you get the injector out. You want to use a pair of needle nose pliers when you pull that out. I'm going to try to do it the way that you should do it. Alright, now normally the fuel injectors pop right out, but in the event you get one that does not want to come out, first thing you can do is wrap it in a rag that you got some grip on. You can use any size rag. I go jumbo. And just reach down here and just kind of wiggle it till it comes out. Sometimes you can twist it and it'll break it loose. And we got a coolant leak here, so we're going to have to tip this line up because we're losing antifreeze. We're going to tip that line up over that way. Alright, in the event that it don't want to come out, take your needle nose, grab it from the top, and just kind of pull it straight up. It'll come out. Try not to pull too hard that you deform the end of the injector. I didn't do it, so you know, we're good there. And then we'll set it over on our table. Of course, it left its O-ring behind, so we got to pick out the O-ring. So we'll pick out the O-ring, which is really easy to do here. You just scoop it out like that. Alright, so we got our injectors out. We're going to go back through and clean these out before we put the injectors back in the engine. But looks like we have at least one bad injector. We'll wipe off our engine again. We got a misfire code for 1 and 3. So let's see what would cause 1 and 3 to misfire. And let's see. We know we got one bad injector, which is injector 1, because it was dumping out around the top of the plenum. So I'm definitely changing 1 and 3. That should solve the problem. We got these retaining clips we got to put back together. And we got to put get our O-rings over there. We'll get them cleaned up and put back on the injector. So I'm going to move you to the table, and then we're going to start rebuilding our fuel rail. Okay, we got to get our O-ring out of our number 4 here. So, wait, no, that would be number 1. Number 4's still got its O-ring on. See? And put that one back in. So, these just slide back down in, and then you got your retaining clip that goes back on it. So, just kind of push that down in there, like that. And then I'll show you how this clip works. These clips, they hold the injector in. So you want them to look like that. See, like that. And then you're going to find the flat side, which is this side over here. and there's a groove that this sits inside of. You're just going to push it till it snaps in like that, and then you can give it a tug. Make sure that it doesn't come off, because that clip, it hugs this ring right here on the injector rail. So if it's not sitting square, then what you can do is kind of put it back on and then straighten it out with a pair of pliers. We got to put our O-ring back on. So we'll put our O-ring back on. Now you're going to grease these O-rings with some sort of lubricant, like engine lube, petroleum jelly or Vaseline, anything you got. I've seen people use transmission fluid on these. Whatever you have, so that you can get them back in the engine. And put the O-ring back on the way it came off. So if it's like this, where it's got a black surface and a red surface goes up, black surface goes down, so it looks like that. You want to wipe off your injector tips while you got your injector rail out, because all it takes is a small piece of dirt to stop that injector from working. Yep. So we're changing 1 and 3, because I've got a misfire code for cylinder 1 and a misfire code for cylinder 3. So to get an injector out of the rail, you're going to disconnect this clip, which snaps right off. Well, at least it should snap right off. Try not to deform the clip when you do this. Alright, see, there's your clip, and then you're going to rotate so you can free the bond. Pull straight up. It should come right out. Like that. And there's our number 3 injector. Actually doesn't look too bad. It's got a lot of dirt around the port. Looks okay for what I can tell. Alright, and then we're going to clean up our injectors so you can, because what we have, well, see, what's going on with our injectors, it's a mechanical issue. Inside here there's a little piece that goes up and down in here, opens and closes, and if it gets stuck open, you're going to have a leaking injector. So we've got 2 injectors that, according to our scan tool, are not closing when they need to close. So it's just constantly dumping gas down into the engine. So let me grab our new injectors and we'll put our new injectors in. All right. This is your injector number right there, FJ1000. And here lately I've been getting OE parts in the standard boxes, so I'm hoping that that's the case here. It looks OE to me. Let's see if the numbers match. Yes, the numbers match. We have OE parts for $30 cheaper. Alright, you want to take your end off of there. We're going to pull our piece off the bottom. This even has a QR code like the original one did. That's amazing. There we go. I hope you saw that. What I did was I took my pick down inside the plastic and just kind of ran it around as I pulled up on the plastic. Alright, so here's our bad injector. Here's our good injector. You can kind of see, maybe might be able to pick up on what could be going on there. So to put these in, you're just going to push them down in there. I've never greased the blue O-ring. I always grease the red one though. I don't ever grease the blue one, because the blue one's going into this aluminum rail. Although if you want to throw some PB Blaster down in there, you can. You're just going to have a hard time starting the engine up when you get ready to start the engine. Alright, so that was number 1. So we're going to take our clip that's slightly deformed. We're going to grab our pliers. We're going to reform our clip. Okay, so if you get a clip that's deformed, You're going to take your pliers like that, and you're going to hold the corner of it, see, because it's kind of bent. Take a rag so you can grab a hold of it without it stabbing you in the hand, and you just want to kind of rebend the clip back like that. See, your clip's back. And sometimes if you want to level it up, you can grab it at the top here and just kind of squeeze it together by your fingers, and it will reform. Then you want to make sure that your injector's down all the way. You've got your flat right there. This goes in just like this, just like that. And you want to line it up inside the ridge and then push until you hear it snap. And then if you have doubts about it holding, after you get it down in there, you can take your pliers and squeeze the ends together. Just put a little bit of a squeeze on. These clips are not very, you know. There we go. And then you want to just hold the rail and give it a firm tug. Make sure that it doesn't come up, and you're good to go. Injector 1's been replaced. So let's get injector 3 put in. So just pull up on your clips here. Now, in case you didn't see it before, let me make sure that you're in focus, and I'll do it again. All right, you see that right there? You see it's got these little edges right here. Take your pick, run it across like this. When you come across one of those, you lift up on it like that, and you're going to keep picking up on it until you get the cap off. See that? And keep pulling up on it because you got these little keepers. See them little keepers right there? Those little keepers, you just take your pick. You get up underneath like that. Like that. Just kind of pry up. And you get it past the O-ring. And cap comes off. Alright, so you got to push your O-ring back down. Make sure that your hole is free of dirt, if I hadn't mentioned that already. Set your new injector down inside your fuel rail. And just nice and snug like that. Take your clip. See, the other way that we knew we had a bad injector was when we pulled the injectors out, number one just started dumping everywhere. If you have a good injector, it's not going to dump. It's going to retain the fuel inside the fuel rail until you tip it to one side or the other, and then gravity will empty out the fuel rail. You got a bad injector, you're going to have, it's going to dump fuel almost instantaneously as soon as you pull it out of the engine block, because you're opening up the space for the fuel to go somewhere, and first place it's going to go is wherever it can. So now we just got to spray these down with some brake cleaner, some throttle body cleaner. I'm going to use throttle body cleaner because these tips right here can be damaged if you use anything else. So let me go get some throttle body cleaner. We're going to spray these tips down. Then we're going to grease this thing up and get it back in the car. So I'll be right back. Okay, now we're going to clean our injectors up and get them greased to go back in. We're going to use dielectric grease. I mean, it works great on spark plugs and everything. If you got any other kind of grease, like I have mentioned before, more power to you, you can use that. Throttle body cleaner, we're going to spray over our old injectors. We're going to take our rag, we're just going to kind of wipe the tops off gently. You just want to just gently get the dirt off the top that we got on them from pulling them out of the engines. Basically all you're doing here. And you're going to see in your injectors, if they've been in there a while, there's going to be dirt all over the place. You want to make sure you get that all cleaned up. If you want to polish your rail, you can. You don't have to. I've gone ahead off camera and got our engine cleaned up, so we're good there. Just do some brake cleaning, a rag, and just wipe out the holes real good. So, clean our hands up real quick. We're going to take our dielectric grease. Alright, so there's our injector rail. We got our new injectors in cylinders 1 and 3. If you're confused on how we determined 1 and 3, flip your rail over. Set it like that, okay? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, okay? That's all you got to do. All right, we got some dirt in number 6 connector. We're gonna clean that out with our throttle body cleaner. So we'll just come over here. We'll just, and then that'll fall out when we tip it back over, because we're gonna tip it back over. See, it just dripped right out, so. All right, so we got 1 through 3 is the closest one to us, 4 through 6 is the back. So we're gonna use our dielectric grease as soon as I locate it again. Oh, there it is. We're gonna put some grease on our O-rings. So, get a big bunch on your finger. Just go around the O-rings with it. Don't get any on the tip of the injector though. Try to stay away from the top of the injector. If you need to go along the bottom of it, just don't touch the top of the injector with this stuff. Pay attention to this part. If your O-rings are hard, which means that if the O-ring was stuck in the engine like ours were, and you pick it out with a pick and you grab it and you pinch it, you pinch your O-ring, and it doesn't flex like that and it's hard, you can go to the parts store, tell them you need an O-ring kit, get an O-ring kit, and put new O-rings on your injectors, because what's going to happen is that O-ring is going to split and it's going to leak. And with all you have to do to get this thing apart, even though it doesn't look like a lot, it's better to err on the side of caution and put new rings on your injectors than to take chances and have the O-ring split. Because what'll happen is it'll split the second it goes back in the engine. And then you'll go and kick your injectors on to double check your work, and you'll find gas all over that injector because that O-ring split. Then you're tearing your car back apart, putting it all back together again, this time with new O-rings. So we've got all of our clips on. Yes, we got all of our clips on. And we've got our injectors cleaned up. We've got our O-rings greased. We got our new injectors installed. Now we're going to go back to the car and put the injector rail back in the car. So I'm going to move you over there, and then we'll get this thing wrapped up and see if our gas smell's gone. We're about ready to put our injector rail back on, but before we do, I noticed we still had some dirt inside of our injector ports. So you take a rag and you wrap it around a screwdriver. It could be flat or a Phillips. And then you stick your screwdriver down in there like this, and you give it a twist. And what that does is that gets all the trash out of that cylinder. See that? All that dirt came out of there. The last thing you want is a piece of dirt keeping your injector from sealing, because you want to have a nice tight seal when you put these together. Sometimes you can take your rag and just kind of single file it, stick it over top of the hole there, and just take your screwdriver down in there and just kind of rock it around inside the hole like that. You want to do this dry. You don't want to put any brake clean on it, because we're going to brake clean it here in a second. We're going to give it a good liberal spray here in a minute. That's how you clean out your injector ports, because you got a lip down in here that O-ring rests against. And if you got even the slightest little bit of dirt inside that ridge at the bottom of the injector port, you're going to have problems with your injector sealing up. So this is how you clean your ports out. Not to... Alright, that took care of that. You see how it sprayed up? See how it sprayed up inside the plenum? That's how you know you did it right, if you can get it to spray up inside the plenum like that. And then you take your rag back around and you can dry out the holes. Like that. Just take your rag and just stuff it down in the hole and dry it back out. And then these back ones are already dry, so I don't have to worry about that. Now I can go get our fuel rail and get our fuel rail installed, so I'll be right back. Okay, so here's our rail. So what you want to do here is we need to slide it down underneath this electrical, nice and careful. One thing you could do, and I've done this before, is take your coolant hose and wrap it back around, but we're going to do it this way. And then we're going to, we're going to have to take a coolant hose, slide it under here like this. Try not to put coolant inside your intake. That'll give you a whole other problem. And take your coolant hose here and you just kind of pick it up through the bottom here. Kind of have to do this because otherwise your fuel rail won't sit right. You can take the hose off completely, but in order to do that, you got to drain the coolant system. This way you don't have to drain the coolant system. You just shift your reservoir hose around, and then you see that, and then you can move your, and then see we're draining coolant again, so we got to put our hose back over here where it was sitting so it can drain some more. Okay, well, it stopped draining, so I think we're good. Alright, so then we just set our rail down. Make sure that all your electrical is up and out of the way when you do this. Scoot this thing over to where you're, sit it down to where all the injectors are resting inside their respective holes. Do not push down yet. Make sure that all your wiring is up and out of the way. Okay? Once you've done that and you got your injectors centered, go ahead and push them down inside the hole. And you just go over here and just push this side down like that. Make sure that your bolt holes line up. Don't use the bolt holes to push your injectors down. You'll almost always damage your red O-ring. And then you want to make sure that your bolts start good. You're going into an aluminum housing, so it's real easy to cross thread, especially these are fine thread bolts. They're real easy to cross thread. Get a couple threads in there. Okay, and then you can come back around here. Just get some threads in it. If they act like they're catching and they're not threading in all the way, that's just Ford. Every Ford I've ever worked on or ever owned has had that problem. You also have a injector rail retaining clip right here. You want to make sure that that is in place. Yeah, sometimes you'll get choppy electrical when you, or not electrical, but choppy bolts when you go to put those in. And we'll zip our bolts back down. Another thing you want to do while you got it apart is inspect your connectors for any signs of arcing or any signs of damage due to heat or some sort of other issue. There is no torque spec for these bolts. These are snug bolts. If you do want to torque them to 89 inch-pounds. I don't torque them, I just snug them. All right, your fuel rail's down. We can go ahead and plug our injectors in now. You want to hear them click when you plug them in. That one clicked. That one clicked. That one clicked. One other point to note here is that these retaining tangs on the back, if it's an older car, it's got like almost 200,000 on it, these tend to snap off. If they do, you're going to have to zip tie these onto the fuel rail. Unless you want to tear all this tape off and replace the wire, which I don't ever do. So, well, I don't know. You could probably cut it right there at the end of the connector, and then you got this piece here. This is the part you want. But also, if you want to put dielectric grease in here, if you're thinking you got a connection problem, you can do that. That'll help with conductivity as far as making sure that the injector switches on and off. But you want to check your connector for any signs of contamination in the pins. You want to look for broken pieces. You're going to have every one of your injectors is going to have a section missing. This is so that it fits down on the injector right. This piece that gets cut out here, when you see it goes down like that. So it sits up inside, right up against the end of the plug, right up against the injector base. So you're going to have that. Don't freak out if you see that. All right, so we're going to snap that one back down. You didn't hear that one snap because I had my finger over it. All right, so then the next thing we need to do is we got this wire right here we need to put back in our retainer. So we got to open our retainer back up, which we just took it loose with a flathead screwdriver. So that retainer right there, your screwdriver goes in here, twist, and lift up. And then you can put this little wire back in there. And then that wire snaps down inside there. It will in a minute. There it goes. We got to hook our fuel line back up. So we got to locate our fuel line, which should be right here. Check your O-ring. Make sure your O-ring's in good shape. By the way, when you pull that clip out, you got to push this end in here. You got to push this end in and it'll open it right up. So we're going to snap this back down like this. Make sure it snaps. Okay, and then you got your red locking tab. Goes in like this. Snap that locking tab in. Hold the line with your thumb. Give it a push up. If you can pull it off the line, it's not on all the way. This is a high pressure fuel line. You want to make sure it's on all the way. Okay. So at this point, you've got two options as far as that small rubber line goes that goes to the radiator. You can either leave it off until your intake's on, or you can put it back on. I figure since we've gone through the trouble of taking it off, I'm going to leave it off. I need to wipe my engine back down. Okay. So make sure that your sealing area is nice and dry. Make sure all your plugs are plugged in. And put your intake back on. All right, when you put your intake back on, you want to look at the bottom of it. You want to make sure that there's no dirt or anything on your O-rings. Clean your O-rings off. Yeah, like I said before, if you've already replaced these, and as long as they're still pliable, see, I can flex them. Don't worry about changing them. But if they're hard or brittle in any way, you need to replace them. Okay, so you get your upper plenum back on. We need to navigate this tube right here. We need to navigate this tube towards the back where that purge valve sits. In order to do that, we got to get it underneath our fuel line. So this is how I do it. I just slide it over like that. And then before we get too far involved, we need to hook up our brake booster right here. This is our brake booster. We need to grab our pliers here. So reach in here with your pliers. You want to kind of do it like whichever way you can get to. Sometimes if you can get this hose to cooperate, you can get this in further outside the car, but you just want to grab your clamp and just drag it back down where it was. You've got to move that purge line just a little bit to get the clamp to pass. And that line's on. And then this line back here attaches to this port in the back of the valve cover here. Push that down on there like that. This will practically line itself up. We've got to pull our electrical out of the front here, make sure our rail lines are out of the way. Lift those up to the top. Set this down. Before you get into taking the bolts and putting the bolts back in, we need to put our throttle body bolt back in underneath the throttle body. That bracket bolt has to go in first. that bracket bolt goes in right under here. It has to go in first. If it doesn't go in first, you're going to have a problem getting it in later. Like I said, all these bolts are 8s except for mine. I had to go replace this one, so it's a 10. So you want to pick up on your throttle body just enough to where you can feel the threads grab on your bolt and get it going in like that. Don't tighten it till the very end. There's no torque spec on it, but don't tighten it till the very end. Alright, so we got our bolt in. We can hook up our throttle body now. Push our clip down. If it wasn't already pushed down, I would push it down. Alright, now we got to get our bolts. There's 6 bolts. I'll show you how these go. Alright. So because I took the time to separate them, I know exactly where these bolts go. One on my left hand goes in this hole right here. These 2 go over here, like that. You want to get a couple threads started on each one with the plenum just kind of just sitting in space. You have a couple alignment tabs on the bottom of your plenum in case you get lost. And then of course our big long bolt, this big buddy right here, this one goes back here in this hole. And then we've got our 2 bolts that go over here on the side that you can't see. Get a couple bolts started. Okay. And then you want to go ahead and tighten these down, but don't snug them. There's a torque spec and a bolt pattern to this. I'm going to show you the bolt pattern. This is number 1. Alright, this is number 2. This is number 3. Wait, no, this is number 3. This is number 3. Number 4. Number 5. Number 6. You're going to torque these to 7 foot-pounds or 89 inch-pounds. So let me go grab my inch-pound torque wrench and we'll torque those bolts down. Okay, so when you torque these down, my torque wrench is set to just about 90 foot-pounds, 89, 90 foot-pounds. Or inch-pounds, I'm sorry, inch-pounds, not foot-pounds, inch-pounds. 7 foot-pounds if you're going to try to use the big one on it. For this job, you want to use your long tool because you don't want to use an extension on these. You don't need to. So we're going to just run these down until they tighten up. That's all you got to do there. Well, that was out of order. That should have been number 2. All right, there's number 1. I'm going to start over because I screwed up. There's number 1. There's 2. 3 is over here. Number 4 is right here. Number 5 is over here. And number 6 is down here on this corner. Alright. We're torqued. Now we can put our 10 millimeter on our ratchet here and we can tighten up our bolt underneath our throttle body. It should be just about tight. There's that one. That's why you don't tighten that up till the very end. Take your line right here, you know, feed it down. We're going to put our rail back on here. Snap that down inside your rail. And then you want to tuck that underneath the air conditioning hose. Put it back on the reservoir. And then we'll roll our clamp over and we'll tighten our clamp up. Alright, so let's see where we at. We got to put our bolt back in that holds our fuel rail to our upper intake. And that screws right here. that just goes in this corner right here. Let's see, that's our 10. Alright. Now we're going to zip that down. Going in the plastic so you don't have to He-Man it. Alright, so let's make sure we got everything hooked up to this point. We got our throttle body plugged in. We got our fuel injection plugged in. We got our fuel source plugged in. We got to get our air cleaner back on. And we got to hook up our purge valve back here. So we got to reach back here and hook up our purge valve. Okay, I'm going to move you over here so I can put the air box back together, and then we'll see if we can get it to start. Alright, so this also has alignment tabs on it too, by the way. So what you want to do is you want to slide it down and then make sure that it's away from everything and scoot it forward just a little bit. Go ahead and just grab a hold of your throttle snorkel down here and just put that right there on the throttle body. And then you just want to push this down and then slide it forward. And once you get it slid forward, you can lock it down. Alright, there's a tube that goes in here that all Fords have. It's a purge tube. Hook your line back up to the top there. That's a neat little clip, by the way. This is the first car I've ever worked on that had that clip on it. Pretty cool looking clip. And you want to come down here, hook your PCV line up like that. Alright, we got to hook up our map sensor right here. Make sure that you push your clip in when you got a clip on the bottom. Make sure that gets pushed in when you get this back on. Reach under there, push that forward. Alright, we got to tighten up our clamp back there. So let's get our clamp tightened up real quick. Since we got our 8 already on our ratchet, we can go ahead and do this with it. Get it nice and tight. Alright, we're all connected. Let me go grab a key. Got to clear our tools from the area. And we'll go grab a key and we'll turn the key on. We'll make sure that our injector is sealed. And if our injector is sealed, we're going to go ahead and try to start it. But we got to have a key because this is a push button car. And so as long as you don't push the brake, it won't start. So we can go ahead and just hit the button so where it activates the fuel pump, and then we can see if our fuel rail is leaking or not. So I'll go grab a key and I'll be right back. All right, I got our key here. I'm going to pressurize the fuel rail and we're going to look for leaks. I don't know if you heard anything, but key is on. I don't see no leaks down there. Looks like we're all sealed. Alright, I'm going to back you off the engine and we're going to go ahead and start it. So, we're going to see if we got good to go or not. If we're good to go, then we can send this car home after I do an oil change on it. Which I'm not going to film because oil changes are just something that everybody knows how to do. If I ever come across one that seems a little bit challenging, I'll definitely record that one, but otherwise. Alright, so we're going to see if she still rocks and rolls and chugs. Alright, car. Let's go ahead and start this. got to give it a minute because it's got junk in the fuel system, so we're going to let it run a minute, and then we're going to see if we got chug. No gas smell. I already forgot to hook a wire up inside of our wiring in here. I think we're done. So at this point, I'll go ahead and get the scan tool on her, make sure that I don't have any other issues on it, and ship it. So that'll do it for this one. We'll see you on the next one.